This is Algebra 1, Lesson 2.9. We're going to look at percents today and calculating percents. So first, your warm-up says to change the percent to a decimal, and you may or may not remember this, but to change a percent to a decimal, we take wherever the decimal is. So if the decimal is not written, we assume that it's after, and we move it 2 spaces to the left. So this is 0.73 as a decimal. For this one, we would move it 1, 2, so it would be 1.12. For this one, this is a little tricky because we'd have to add some zeros, so we'd have to go 1, 2, so it would be 0.006 as a decimal. And this last one, again, it's not written here, so we'd have to go 1, 1, 2, so that means we have to add a 0 in, so it's 0.01. Okay? The next one says to change each fraction or mixed number to a decimal. So if something is 1/2, okay, that is 0.5, right? Because 0.5 is 5/10, so 5/10 is a half. 1/3 as a decimal is a little tricky because this is a repeating decimal. So you'll probably kind of start to memorize this one, but if you plugged in 1 divided by 3 into a calculator, you would get out 0.33 repeating, okay? And so you know that 1/3 is more than a quarter, so you know it has to be more than 0.25. So just to kind of give your brain an idea. All right, number 7, it says to convert to a decimal. So remember I told you, I think a few lessons ago, that we could change this into a fraction over 10. That number over the 10 just becomes what's in the 10th place, so that is your decimal. And then for number 8, we can do the same thing. We can make this 1 2/10, which would be 1.2. All right, solving the proportions. Solving proportions, remember the easiest thing is probably to cross multiply. So that's 24 equals 2x, and then we divide by 2. So 12 is equal to x, or x is equal to 12, whichever way you write it is fine. Same thing here, cross multiply, so we get 42 equals 10x, because 10 times x is 10x, divided by 10. Okay, so we're going to get 42 over 10, which can simplify to 21 over 5. So today we're going to look at solving problems involving percents, and then if you haven't heard the vocab word percent, you're going to hear that today a lot. So let's define what a percent is. A percent is a ratio, so a number over a number, that compares a number to 100. For example, 25% is equal to 25 out of 100. To find the fraction equivalent to the percent, you write the percent as a ratio with a denominator of 100 and simplify it. So for example, if it's 25%, I put 25 on top and 100 in the bottom, and then you simplify that, and that becomes 1/4. Okay? To find the decimal equivalent of a percent, just divide by 100, or I talked about in the beginning, we can move the decimal place over 2 places to the left. That's probably the easiest thing. So some common equivalents that as you get to use them more, you're going to start to memorize them, and I would like you to try to memorize them just because they'll make work faster for you. So you should know that 10% is the same thing as 1/10 of something, or 0.1. Just like 20% is 1/5 and 0.2. So going from the percent to the decimal is pretty easy. Remember, we can move the decimal point over 2 spaces, but you need to start memorizing these fractions, and I really want you to try to do that, okay? You can find percents greater than 100. For example, if I have 120%, you would put 120 over 100 and simplify it, and that would become 1.2. You can also find percents that are less than 1%. For example, if I have just 0.5%, you could put 0.5 over 100, and that's the same thing as I said, moving the decimal 2 places to the left, and we get 0.005. The last little part here is that you can use proportions to find an unknown value. And what I need you to memorize is this. The part over the whole is always equal to the percent over 100. And I know that some of my classes like to think of this as the is over the of equals the percent over 100. And whichever one you like, it doesn't matter to me, but you need to understand this relationship, okay? So let me show you what I mean. If it tells us to find 30% of 80, we're always going to put the percent over here and the 100 on the bottom. So it's 30%, so that goes over here. Now, they want us to find the part of 80. So we don't know the part, that's our x. And the 80 is our whole. You could think of this as here's the of, so the of goes on the bottom, and you don't know the is. So that's what's on top, the x. Now, if you cross multiply, you're going to get 100x is equal to 2,400. From here, we just divide by 100. That cancels, and x is equal to 24. So the number that is 30% of 80 is 24. So now you guys might notice here's your is and here's your of. That's what I was saying is I like to think of the is over the of equals the percent over 100. If you want to check your answer, put 24 over 80. And if you calculate that out, that comes out to 0.3, which to go from a decimal to a percent, we move it 2 places to the right. So that is 30%. If we're going from a percent to a decimal, we move it 2 places to the left. So make sure you don't get those confused. Okay? Now, another way you can solve these problems is by making an equation. So if you don't like the proportion method, you could do an equation method. And the way this works is, let's say it says to find 120% of 15. What you do is you convert the percent to a decimal. You always have to convert it to a decimal. So if I move it over, that becomes 1.2. And it's always the percent as a decimal times the number. So percent as a decimal times the number you want to find the percent of. So we would multiply that by 15, and that would tell us what is 120% of 15. And that answer comes out to 18. If you don't like this method and you want to use your is over of, you can do that. That's totally fine. So our is over of would be our x over 15 equals 120 over 100. And if you solved it by cross multiplying, you would still get 18. Okay, so another problem we're going to work with. It says, what percent of 45 is 35? Now, this is different. They give you the part and the whole, the is and the of. They don't give you the percent. That's what they want to know. What is the percent? So that is your x. Your of, or your whole, is 45. And your is 35, your part. So now we're going to multiply. We get 3,500 equals 45x. We divide by 45. And x comes out to about 77.8. So that means 35 is about 77.8% of 45. When you solve your answers this way, using a proportion, if you're solving for a percent, the answer already comes out in percent form. You don't need to move the decimal. If you were to solve it this way, just remember, you have to convert the percent to a decimal. And also, if this was like you were solving for the percent this way, you would have to convert it back from a decimal to a percent. So this way, you don't really have to convert anything using the proportion. Okay, 230 is what percent of 200? So 230 is, that's my is, what percent of 200? So meaning what percent, we don't know, over 100, because it's always a percent out of 100. So that gives us 230, or 23,000 equals 200x, divide by 200, and x comes out to 115, which means 230 is 115% of 200. So if on a test or a quiz or homework, you need to put a percent on this answer. Make sure you understand that. 40% of what number is 88%, and they want us to round our answer. So these, you guys, I understand on your homework you would maybe need a calculator. On your tests and quizzes, I'll give you problems that you don't need a calculator for. So 40%, we always know that's, if we see a percent, that goes over 100. Of what number? So of what number, meaning we don't know what number, is 88? Is goes on top. So 8800 equals 40x. Divide by 40. And if I round, my answer comes out to 220. So this answer should just stay as a number because we're finding what number 88 is of, is 40% of. And it's, so we would say 88 is 40% of 220. Okay, another example. 20 is 0.4% of what number? So 0.4% over 100. 20 is of what number, meaning we don't know. So cross multiply. 0.4x divide by 0.4, and your answer comes out to 5,000. So that means 20 is 0.4% of 5,000. Okay, word problem. Pay attention because I know you guys struggle with word problems. The serving size of a popular orange drink is 12 ounces. The drink is advertised as containing 5% orange juice. How many ounces of orange juice are in one serving size? Okay, we know that the 12 or the 5 is our percent over 100. We need to decide 12 ounces. Is that the part or the whole? Well, it says the serving size. The entire drink is 12 ounces. And we want to know how many of those ounces, what part of those ounces is that 5%. So we don't know what part of that drink is actually, orange juice. Okay, so now we're going to cross multiply. 12 times 5 is 60 equals 100x. Divide by 100. So x is equal to 0.6. So this means out of 12 ounces in that drink that you're ordering, only 0.6 of the ounces are actual orange juice. So it might not be the healthiest drink, but maybe you're not drinking it for the orange juice. You just wanted to know. So again, in this problem, you needed to determine what was the part and what was the whole. And we already knew the 5% went there. So here are some practice quiz problems. Go ahead and pause the video, see if you get these answers correct. I will give you the answers right now. So 20% of 80 is 16. What percent of 160 is 20? That's 12.5%. 35% of what number is 40? That would be 35% of what number is 40 would be 114.3, so I just had to round that. 120 is what percent of 80? You get 150%, which makes sense because 120 would be on top and 80 is on the bottom. So that means that you're going to have a percent bigger than 100. 320% of 8. Now, if we're finding 320% of something, this is going to be a bigger number than 8. So I did 3.2 times 8. If you want to set up your proportion, you can, but I converted this to a decimal and multiplied it by 8, and you get 25.6. 65 is 0.5% of what number? So I set up a proportion for this one. And I got x is 1300. So if you have questions, just ask, and we will do some practice problems on your homework and go from there.